So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to work on a chess piece. So this is a little chess pawn. It's very high-tech looking. One thing we're going to do is we're going to learn some new skills, but also the big thing we're going to do here is really work on this timeline, interacting with the timeline and going through a series of prototypes with our boss or whoever, client, so that you can really get used to working with the timeline to go back. It's one of the most powerful features that really makes Fusion good for professional work, because you don't have to just start all over again or something like that. If your boss asks you to change something, you just go back in the timeline and change it. So I'm going to just create a new file by just click. That's what this little plus sign will do for you. It'll always create a new untitled file. I'm going to leave this guy up just so I can refer back to it when I'm doing things, so you can kind of see there's a method to my madness. And again, as always, the first thing I'm going to do is save it. So Oaken Chess Piece. Don't call it Oaken Chess Piece. Call it your last name. And click Save. I've got my Oaken Chess Piece and I'm ready to go. I'm going to be drawing this vertically on the vertical plane. It would be weird to do this on its side. And the first thing I'm going to do is draw kind of a profile of the chess piece. So profiles generally are drawn on a vertical plane. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a sketch. And just so you're on the same plane as me, as always, I'm going to work on that YZ plane. If you worked on the XZ plane, it might be a little confusing. Definitely don't work on the XY plane, because that'll just won't work at all. Okay, and it's going to spin around. And the first thing I'm going to do is draw kind of the y-axis of this piece. So choose L, or I'm going to click on the line tool, and then just start at the origin. Click, let go of your mouse button and go upward. Don't drag it with your mouse button held down, because that'll make it hard for you to harder to add dimensions. And then I'm just going to type in 80 and click enter to tell it I'm done with that line. And then I'm going to choose the line tool again, and I'm going to draw kind of the profile of the base. So I'm basically drawing an L. This one, I'm going to draw 30 horizontally and hit enter. And that's kind of what the axes of the base horizontally and the main part of the piece vertically are going to look like. You'll see what I mean eventually. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the little head. So the head, in this case, partly because I want to show you how you might use a different tool than the center diameter circle, I want the top of the head to be at the top of this axis. So I'm going to choose the 2-point circle, just so you can see how these different circles might come in handy. You could do it the other way. I just think this is easier. So I'm going to tell it I want the top of the circle to be at here I'll zoom in a little, at the top of the axis, and I'm going to come down from there. So if you just click and don't hold your mouse button down and drag downward, you'll start a circle, and this one's going to be 20 millimeters, and hit enter. So I quit Fusion and I relaunched it just to remind you again that so now I'm going to draw the base of this, and I'm going to draw a body for it, like imagine a chess piece, right? So I'm going to draw the profile of what connects the base to the head, which is the body, I guess. And I quit and launch just so I could remind you that if I now started a new sketch, if I drew the base and the body, they wouldn't actually be connected to the L and the head that I drew. They would be a separate sketch. So when you draw things on separate sketches, Fusion assumes you know what you're doing and that you want them to be separate and you don't want them to interact. So very, very common mistake for students to make is to start multiple sketches, and then it's even hard to find where anything is. And you can combine things later, but it's kind of a pain. So just try to do it right the first time. When I go back to this, I'm going to not create a new sketch to draw more geometry, but I'm going to right click on the old sketch and edit it, unless there was some reason I wanted to create a separate sketch. Okay. So now what I want to teach you guys is how to, I'm going to draw the base, and I'm going to draw the base to very specific requirements that my client has given me. And it doesn't look like this, but this is not a chess piece, but I just wanted to show you, I just Googled working drawings, and this was sort of a cute, fun working drawing. So when you're doing things for a manufacturer and for a client, they need a lot of information beyond just that it looks nice. Architects do the same thing, right? They draw all the dimensions and they have all kinds of notes and things that go with the drawing so that a manufacturer will understand what they need to do, how much material they need. The client knows how much the material is going to cost. And to do that, a lot of times they need numbers so that they can do the math. Okay. And also, it really helps you to help the client understand that you're meeting their needs. So for instance, this client has told us that they want the base to be 10 millimeters high, and they want it to slope in such a way that 10 millimeters from the edge of the base, it's 6 millimeters high. So that's what they've told us. And when they see this drawing, we want them to see that indeed we did that for them. So if they go, wow, that doesn't look quite the way I asked you for, you can say, nope, there it is, 10, 6, right? So we're going to create what are called construction lines, and you're going to learn how to do that. Yep. So again, and eventually, once we've created the construction lines, we're going to create an arc that starts here, that snaps to a point that's 10 millimeters from the edge and 6 millimeters high, and ends 10 millimeters high right at the center axis of the piece. If you don't know what I mean, you will by the time we're done, I promise. Okay? So to make construction lines, you use the same line tool. There's not a special tool. So the first thing I want to do is figure out where 10 millimeters high is. And yes, you could count graph paper squares, but you don't want everyone who ever interacts with your drawing to have to count graph paper squares to see the drawing. You want to create these construction lines so that everything is obvious to them and they don't have to sit there and count squares. So I'm going to choose the line tool, and where you put this doesn't really matter. It can be as far over, as close as you want. You're just going to put it somewhere convenient. And by the way, when it created these itself when I drew these lines, because I didn't hold the mouse button down. But for an arc, it's not going to do that. So for lines, you don't really need to go and create special lines. It automatically creates themselves. Same for rectangles. Mostly you're going to be doing this for curved things. So I'm going to start at the x-axis here, at where the bottom of the chess piece is. And I'm just going to start drawing up. And I've got to make sure it goes straight up. So you want it to say 90 degrees, and you want it to, it snaps pretty easily to straight up. And again, I want this to be 10 millimeters high. So I'm just going to let go of my mouse button, type in 10, and it will create a new line at 10 millimeters high. So that will tell me where I need to line up the top of the base. Okay? Now, right now, this is a regular line. Well, actually, I'll make some more lines, and then I'll turn them into construction lines. So the other thing I want to know where 6 millimeters high is and 10 millimeters in from the edges. And I want to mark that. So I'm going to use the line tool. And again, I'm going to go kind of close to this and straight down from the bottom edge, which I don't need to make a construction line for. I can see that easily because I'm going to be so close to the edge. And I'm going to just start drawing and go straight across. Again, I'm not going to drop down in an angle, but go at 180 degrees. And I'm going to come in 10 millimeters. And then I want to know where 6 millimeters high is at this 10 millimeter point. So I'm going to draw another construction line. And this one I'm going to draw inside the L. So I'm going to start right above that 10 millimeter line. And I'm just going to click my mouse button and let go of it and start drawing and type in 6. And I have a line now, a point now that is exactly 10 millimeters in from the base and 6 millimeters high, which I'll use to make my arc. The next thing is, though, these lines, when you make a line in Fusion, unless you tell it differently, it assumes that it's what they call a normal line. And a normal line is part of your geometry. It's going to interact with your object, which means this is going to be this weird line in the middle of my base that I don't want there. So if you don't want the line to be functional, you just want it to be a reference, basically, which is what these are, right? These are just references. They're not real lines. Like this line is really the base And this line is really the center axis of my chess piece. They have a function. These lines are just here to tell me where I want things to be. And again, you'll understand as we go further and further, you'll understand this better and better. For now, I just want you to develop the skill of actually making them. So what you have to do is you have to, you choose the line, and initially it's a normal line. We want to turn it into an imaginary line, a construction line. So if you right click on the line, it'll bring up a little flyout menu. And you'll notice that it says normal construction. And what that means, when you see two words like that with a slash between them, it means it's going to toggle back and forth between those two settings. So right now it's a normal line. If I choose this, it'll turn it into a construction line. If I choose it again, it'll turn it back to a normal line. So it toggles back and forth. You could also, I'm pretty sure I've never done it this way because again, you can't see my keyboard. If you just type in X with the line selected, it will also turn it into a construction line. And I find as long as they're highlighted in blue like this, sometimes it toggles back and forth when I'm trying to do other things. So I can stop that being active by just clicking in the white space. So just click in the white space anywhere on your drawing and that will no longer be active. I find it just seems to toggle back and forth when I'm doing other things unless I deactivate it by clicking in the white space. And you can do this to multiple lines at once. So I'm going to click on this one. I'm going to hold the shift key down and click on this one. And then you could just type in X. So now I have them both selected because I held the shift key down when I selected the second one. You could type in X, or you could do what I'm doing because again, you can't see my keyboard. So I'm always going to use menus. Normal construction, I'm going to change these to construction. I'm going to click in the white space to tell them I'm not interested in them anymore. I'm done with them. They're good. Okay. So now these are imaginary lines. They're little dotted lines to let you know they're not really part of the geometry. They're just reference points, just like in this, right? Just like these guys over here, except the way they drew these, they didn't draw them as dotted lines. Got my reference points for my arc. I know it's going to be one end of it's going to be here. It's going to snap to this point, and one end of it's going to be here right across from my reference point telling me where 10 millimeters high is. So the way this client has given me the information is in 3 points: start point, end point, and some point somewhere along the arc. Okay. So that gives me a clue as to which kind of arc I want to use. So they didn't give me a center point. That's another possibility, and you'll get to use that eventually. They didn't tell me it was tangent to some corner, like here. If I was making an arc that was tangent to this 90-degree angle, I might use that. They've given me 3 points, so it's a good clue that I want a 3-point arc. So I'm going to choose that. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to place one of the 2 endpoints. And I don't think it ever really matters which is the start and which is the end point. I'm just starting on the left, going left to right, because I'm a Westerner and I do everything left to right, like the way I learned to read. So I'm going to start right next to this 10 millimeter height reference on the center axis, that vertical line I drew long, long ago, it seems like, and place that point. And then I'm going to let go of my mouse button and just drag my mouse over. I'm not going to stop here. You don't draw the arc the way you would draw it with a pencil. You draw the 2 endpoints first. So I'm going to draw one endpoint. I'm going to come over here. It's just telling me how far apart the endpoints are. Don't worry about that. That might be something I need to know, but not in this case. I'm going to make sure I'm right on the endpoint of the L here, and I'm going to click there. And then if you notice, as I drag my mouse away from the endpoint, once it's got 2 endpoints, it starts making the arc. And now it's waiting for me to place a point on the arc. And when I place that point, it will finish drawing the arc. So I have been told when the arc is 10 millimeters away from the edge of the base, it should be 6 millimeters high. So that's where I'm going to place the 3rd point, and that makes an arc. Okay, and you'll notice it's blue because I connected it to the axis and to the base. If you didn't, it won't be blue because you won't have completed a completely enclosed shape, and you did it wrong and you need to undo and do it again. Okay, so I'm done drawing the arc. I'm going to hit enter to let it know I'm done with that arc and I don't want to draw any more arcs. So now that I've drawn the base, I want to draw the piece that connects the base to the head. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. So this piece is going to start up here and it's going to come down here somewhere and it's going to form kind of the body of the piece that can, right now the head and the neck are disconnected. There's just a line connecting them. There's nothing three-dimensional, nothing that I could make three-dimensional. So I've been told that that line, they want it to connect 12 millimeters from the central axis. So once again, I'm going to make construction lines because that's a big part of what this lesson is about. So I'm going to start at where the base connects with the center axis. And I'm going to click and I'm going to draw a straight line out, making sure I'm going straight and not at an angle, 0 degrees in this case. I'm going to type in 12 and click OK. And then I'm just going to draw, I'm going to zoom way in here so you can really see what I'm doing. I'm going to draw a line straight down from that point to where it creates a green X and connects to the base. But I don't want that triangle, and then I'll hit enter. I don't want that triangle to be a shape. These are just reference lines to let me know where I'm going to draw to and from. I want these to be construction lines. So notice how it's made them into a shape right now. Well, I don't want that to be true. So I'm going to click on this one. I'm going to click on this one with the shift key held down. I'm going to right click. You could just type in X. You can see, right? People do this a lot. So that's why it's an easily memorable keyboard command. And I'll turn those into construction lines. So notice how now this is no longer a shape because these are just imaginary lines. Okay? And then I'm going to do the same thing up here. Okay, so they've told me that the line is going to end at the head 4 millimeters from the central axis. So once again, I'm going to draw a pair of construction lines. I'm going to go out 4 millimeters. So I'm just going to start the line out and then type in 4. Wish you could see my keyboard. And then I'll zoom in even a little more here so you can really see what I'm doing. I'm going to also draw a line going straight up from that endpoint so that I really see where it's going to connect and I don't have to kind of guess, okay? And so where that turns green, that as an X, and once again, it thinks I have to hit enter to tell it I'm done drawing lines. It thinks I wanted to create a shape, but I didn't. I'm just going to select and shift click and select both and turn those into construction lines as well. So I'm going to draw a line from where this construction line meets the head to where this construction line meets the base. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in on this, choose my line tool, and then find the little green square where they intersect and click and start drawing. So I'm going to come down here so that I can zoom in a little bit. You can zoom with your scroll wheel while you're drawing. You just have to move your line around to odd places. And then I'm going to zoom up here to where this construction line is meeting this part of the drawing. Okay. And there's my line that I've made that is exactly where my client wanted it to be. Okay. And then I'll hit enter to tell it I'm done drawing lines. I'm going to zoom out. And I've got this all set and ready to go. And I am ready to finish my sketch and revolve. Okay, so I've got my profile for my little chess pawn. So I'm going to finish sketch. This little half of the circle, it's not really necessary, but it was easier to draw a circle than a half circle. So, and it doesn't really get in the way. It's just kind of there. This is going to be my profile, right? So this is what I'm going to choose to spin around and make material. And if you forget what that looks like, so make sure you finish your sketch. You should only have one sketch. They're all part of the same sketch. And click Create, Revolve. And we did this before with the scoop, but I'll review it. Sometimes when you do this, it already selects. If you have something already selected, it thinks you knew what you were doing. So if that happens to you, just X out the selections if it's got some weird things selected already. It didn't happen to me this time, but sometimes that will happen to you. So it should have nothing selected with the profile being blue. If it already has something selected and the axis is blue, just unselect things and just change to where you're selecting the profile. And then the profile is made up of these 3 pieces, and it will just wait while I choose all 3 of those pieces. I don't need to shift click or do anything like that. The dialog boxes are very smart that way. But what it's not smart about is it doesn't know when I'm done selecting profiles. So I need to tell it by clicking on the axis button. And then if I choose the axis, I have a chess piece. Magic. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead. It's a new body because there's only one body here, so there's nothing to join to anyway. That's not a choice. You could make a part of a chess piece by going less than 360 degrees, but there's no need to do that. I'm going to click OK, and I've got my chess piece, and it's ready to show my client. And as always, my client has opinions. So one opinion of my client is it's kind of a boring chess piece, and they want something that looks a little more human. The other thing is they don't want something solid because it's a waste of plastic. They want something hollow, like a glass, right? Where it's hollow, but it's got a thick wall to it, thick enough to be strong. And they're giving me the parameters for that. And they're giving me the parameters for what they want the shoulder to look like, right? So what I'm going to do is I don't need to undo the revolve, because I am going to end up revolving it again. I'm going to go back in time by using my magical timeline. I just made more screen mistakes. I don't know why I have my data panel up so long. I'm going to go back to my magical timeline down here and go back in time without undoing anything. And then I can go back forward in time again when I'm done. So I'm going to right click on the sketch and say edit sketch. And I'm going to change the sketch. And then when I'm all done, it'll just jump right forward to the revolve and re-revolve everything, because I do want to keep the revolve. Sometimes I'll want to delete things, but in this case, I can just go back in time and fix my drawing. So I am going to delete this guy. And actually, if I wanted to waste your time, I should probably delete all those construction lines. Well, no, those construction lines are still relevant. The client still wants it to connect up here and down there, but the client wants it to come out, like to form a little shoulder and then to come back and form a little body. Okay, so the client has given me working drawings, and the working drawings tell me that the client wants the drawing to be, the shoulder to be formed at 45 millimeters high and 20 millimeters out from the central axis. So the first thing I'm going to do is draw a construction line somewhere along here that goes straight up. Again, make sure it's 90 degrees. Type in 45. That tells me where 45 high is. Better than counting squares or something like that. And then the other thing I want to do is I want to come out, in this case, 20 millimeters from the central axis. So I'm going to draw another construction line that starts at that 40 millimeters high and comes out, and I don't have to count. I can just type 20. I started counting, okay? And then once again, I'm going to click on this guy, and I'm going to click on this guy, and I'm going to right click and turn it into construction lines, and click to dismiss the blue dotted lines because, like I said, for some reason, they just make a mess of things sometimes, I swear. So now I've got all my points. I want to go from here to there and back to here. So the same points were fine for the top and bottom because I don't want to create huge amounts of busy work. So I'm going to start here with a line, choose my line tool. I'm going to come out to here, create a line, and then I'm going to come back down, and then I'm going to come back down from that point down to here, that same point that I connected to earlier, and I'm going to form my little body that way instead. Okay, so now I've got a new profile, and I'll hit enter so I'm not continuing to draw more lines. Okay, so now that I've created this profile, I could revolve it, but my client would be mad at me because when I go to the next meeting and show them the shape they like, they might like the shape, but they would be mad at me because I forgot that they wanted to make it hollow. So in order to make it hollow, it's kind of like the Lego piece. I need to create a wall that is going to be the solid part, and then everything inside here is going to be empty. And in the Lego piece, we used offset, but we can't use offset on an angled piece like this. We're actually going to have to draw. We're going to have to draw those lines, and it'll help me teach you how to make parallel constraints too, which is sort of the whole point. So I'm going to use the line tool. The client has told me they want it to be 4 millimeters in from that point where the shoulder forms. So I'm going to draw a line at 4 millimeters in. And that's going to be my first reference point. And then what I want to do is draw a line going up to the head that's parallel to this line, and a line going down to the base that's parallel to this line. So I'm going to start drawing lines, and I'm going to draw them from here. Now, a lot of times when I'm drawing lines like this, Fusion has its artificial intelligence is really good, and it snaps to a parallel, and it actually shows a little parallel line symbol to show me I'm drawing a parallel line. But for some reason, this particular angled line, maybe it only does it for like 45, 90-degree lines. It just won't do it for this, which is good because I do want to show you how to constrain something. So I'm just going to roughly draw this as parallel as I can-ish. But what's really important is that I do make it connect to the circle. So make sure you've got that. Make sure you're not connecting to the to that construction line. Got to zoom in here and make sure you're really connecting to the circle, or it won't form a fully enclosed shape. Okay, so I'm going to draw to there, and then I'm going to zoom out, zoom back in, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to draw from that same point, and I'm going to come down roughly parallel. And again, I'm going to zoom in just to make sure I am connecting to the base, more or less parallel. And then I'll hit enter to tell it I'm done drawing. Sorry if I make you dizzy with this stuff. Okay, so now I want to make these two lines parallel, and I want to make these two lines parallel. But I don't want these two lines to move, because these two lines are right. If these two lines are not parallel, they're the ones that are wrong. These two lines I drew to my client's exact specifications, 20 millimeters out, 45 millimeters high. So these two are right. They're fixed to reference points. These two are the ones that are, I didn't make a reference point for here and here because I have parallel constraints. I don't have to do that. You'll see, it's really cool thing. But when I make these two lines parallel, it's hard to control on Fusion which line it moves, or if it moves them both kind of halfway to make them parallel. So what I need to do first is I need to lock these two lines. And I think you'll understand why once we're done. So one of the constraints up here, these are all your constraints. One of them is to lock things. So I'm going to choose the lock constraint. And as long as I have that chosen, it will lock anything I click. So I'm going to click on that line and lock it, and that line and lock it, because I'm happy with those two lines. Now I want to move these two lines parallel to those two lines. So I'm going to choose the parallel constraint. And now I'm going to click on this line and this line to tell it I want that pair to be parallel. And as long as I have that constraint chosen, every pair I choose will become parallel. So I'm going to click on this line, and those two will be parallel. And again, notice it didn't move this line, it moved that line. It now is showing me that these two lines are parallel to each other, and these two lines are parallel to each other with those little parallel line symbols. So now I've got my little rib that's going to form the wall when I revolve. All right, so I don't know if you remember, but when we redrew our sketch for our client from the original chess piece, I said that there was this really exciting thing we could do, which is go back in time in the timeline. And so we didn't delete the revolve that we did when we made our first draft of our chess piece. We just kept it, and we right-clicked here and said edit sketch, so that we could save ourselves the trouble of making a new revolve command and just save that work. And when we're done editing our sketch, let Fusion automatically reapply it. Okay, so I chose to do this in this particular case because I wanted to show you that, as with anything where you're relying on artificial intelligence, sometimes it backfires. So this is a case where it's going to backfire. I'm going to click Finish Sketch, and it will apply the revolve. It will jump forward and apply the revolve. The problem is it's applying the revolve in a way I don't want it. It's guessed wrong, and I'll show you how by lighting up my sketch. So when I light up my sketch, you'll see that what it's done is it's actually revolved the inside that I want to be hollow, and has not revolved the wall, because it had a choice to make, and that's just what it guessed based on what I had previously done, and it's just guessed wrong. So in this case, I don't want what it did. So I am going to I could edit it, but in this case, I think since it's artificial, a lot of times I find when the artificial intelligence guesses wrong, it's better just to start all over again instead of trying to make it guess right. So I'm just going to delete the revolve and create a new one. So like I said, the timeline's a really great feature to go back in time sometimes, but sometimes I wanted you to see, don't rely on it 100%. It's not always going to work. Sorry to disappoint you. So under Create, I'm going to choose Revolve, and I'm just going to do that all over again. only this time I'm going to choose the half a head, the top of the rib, the bottom of the rib, and the base. As my profiles, I'm going to choose axis, and I'm going to click on the axis, and I've got my new piece. And I'm going to show this to my client, and my client is going to be all excited about the shape. But my client, I never turned off my sketch. So my client sees this little rib, and they're all excited about the little rib, and they want me to make something that has ribs like this. So they want something that's got 5 ribs and is all futuristic, they've decided. Okay, so now I'm going to turn off my sketch because oops, I shouldn't have left it on. And so what I'm going to do is they want to keep the head and the base the way it was. So you still want to keep that revolve command, you just want to change it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to edit feature. And what I want to do is I want to unselect these parts. Now what I find is, for some reason, I don't know why Fusion does this, but I can unselect that part. But once I've done that, if the axis is still selected, for some reason it doesn't let me edit my selections of my profiles. So and again, I'm doing this for you because this is something where I'm not in the classroom and I wouldn't be able to help you. So I want you to see the pitfalls, and it makes the videos a little longer, but it'll save you a lot of tearing your hair out. So what I want to do is I want to unselect the axis. So for some reason, having the axis selected when I want to edit something just seems to mess it up. And I'm going to go back to profile, and now I can unselect both parts of the rib. Don't ask me why. And now I'll select the axis because I still want to keep the head and the base. I just don't want the rib to revolve anymore, and click OK. And again, because I just created 3-dimensional material, it thinks I don't want to see my sketch anymore, but I do need my sketch to work with the rib. So I'm going to turn the light bulb on. So I've sort of made everything possible go wrong that could possibly go wrong to a beginner on purpose. So you can see all these things that are easy to fix because it's just guessing wrong. So I'm making it guess wrong all the time. So my client has told me they want these ribs to be 4 millimeters thick. So I am going to modify push-pull, and I'm going to choose those 2 profiles. And I'm going to hit home because I always like when I always like to look at it, or just orbit. I always like to look at things from kind of up and to the left at an angle when I'm push pulling, so I can see what's going on. And I can see right now, if I push pull straight out 4 millimeters, that would be weird. It wouldn't be hitting the center of the head the way I want it to. It would be sticking out from the center of the head. So what I want to do is I want to go symmetrically 2 millimeters in each direction to make it 4 millimeters thick. So I don't want to stick with the default one side. I want to change that to symmetric, and then I want to set a distance of 2 millimeters. I think you'll see what I mean, right? If I had gone here, I'll just do it the other way. If I go one side 4 millimeters, see the difference? That's not right, right? So I want to, I'm going to edit that feature just to show you that that's easy to fix, even if I've hit OK. And I'm going to change it to symmetric, and I'm going to change the distance. I don't want it to be 8 millimeters. When you go symmetric, it's times 2. So I'm going to divide by 2 and make it 2 millimeters each way. I do want this to be a new body, because if I made this stick to the top and bottom, then when I want to make multiple ribs, it would be confused because it would also be trying to make multiple heads and multiple bases. So I promised you once upon a time I would make something where it needs to not join. I don't want to join yet because I need to work with this as a separate unit to make it into, to repeat it multiple times. So make sure you choose new body for this, okay? And then click OK. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this into a pattern, a circular pattern, just like we did on the scoop when we made the grooves. But on the scoop, I made a circular pattern. You can save yourself time sometimes when you have a solid piece. Instead of making the sketch a circular pattern and then extruding all of those pieces, you can make a solid piece and turn it into a circular pattern. So when you're in sketching mode, there's a circular pattern command. There's also a circular pattern command when you're in the solid working mode like we are now, modeling mode, they call it. So in this case, I'm going to choose pattern. And for some reason on this menu, it turns it into a flyout. Don't ask me why. I guess because there's 3 choices. We'll use this really cool choice in a minute, or in a few minutes, actually. We want a circular pattern, right? Because we want to repeat this just like the image shows here. We want to repeat this in a circle. Okay, so we're going to choose circular pattern. And here, it usually defaults to faces. And I don't know why. I'm in solid mode. If I left it at faces, it would repeat the surface of my rib 5 over and over again. That's not what I want. I want to repeat the whole rib. So you want to choose bodies here. You want to repeat the entire rib, not just a part, not just the surface of the rib. And then it's waiting for you to select the object you want to repeat. It's still waiting for you to select maybe multiple objects you want to repeat, but you're done. This is all I want to repeat. So I'm ready to choose the axis. Here's my axis. By default, it always wants to make 3. My client told me they want 5. So I'm going to click OK. And now I have this cool chess piece with 5 ribs. Okay. But my client saw something somewhere where they want knobs. So that lets us add one more level of complexity to this project. So they like this, but they want to create, in the end, they actually want to create these little notches. For now, what they want to create is like little knobs in each one of these places. This is the finished product. We have 2 more prototypes to do. So this is our 3rd prototype, right? We had the boring one that came straight down. Then we had and was solid. We had the one with the shoulder that was hollow. And now we got the one that are ribs. That's our 3rd prototype. We need to move on and make a 4th prototype, which isn't even going to be our final one. So in order to create the knobs, we're going to have to go back to the sketch. So we are going to use our timeline to go back in our time machine and go right back to the beginning sketch. And then we'll let the timeline reapply all these other things we did. The revolve of the head and base, the extrude of the little rib, and then the patterning of the ribs. And hopefully this time the artificial intelligence will be more successful than it was last time. And you'll see it will be much more successful because this time it should be able to guess more effectively at what we want it to do. So we are going to right click on that original sketch and say edit sketch. Again, remember, you can't make multiple sketches. These all need to work together unless you want sketches for some reason to be separated from each other. So what our client has told us is that they want it to be 10 millimeters in and 55 millimeters high where that first knob is. So once again, we're not going to use squares to count. We are going to use construction lines. So first thing we're going to do is create a construction line over here somewhere. It doesn't really matter where exactly. From the base going up, and make sure you're going straight up and type in 55. And that's how high we want this to be. And we're going to change that into a construction line and then click in the white space to stop messing around with it. And now this, the line it automatically made to show us it's 55 millimeters. I just wanted to show you this in practice. It's really in our way, so I'm just going to drag it over here where it's out of the way. So you can move these anywhere you want them. So if they're in the way, you can just move them somewhere more convenient. Okay. Then the other thing I want to do is draw a construction line at that 55 millimeter height that comes out 10 millimeters right here onto the rib. So I'm just going to draw, type in 10 and click OK. And once again, I'm going to make that into a construction line and click in the white space to dismiss it. All right. So now the knobs, they want a 3 millimeter diameter knob. So I'm going to create this a center diameter circle and just click right on that spot that I've determined is the right spot according to their parameters and type in 3. And now I've got a nice 3 millimeter diameter circle that's all ready to be turned into a knob. So I'm going to click Finish Sketch. And that's going to jump me forward again. So when I go back to my sketch, it does that annoying thing that it sometimes does, which isn't always annoying because sometimes it's nice to not see the sketches, of hiding the sketch. So if I want to work with that circle and make it a knob, I've got to turn on the sketch. And again, at this advanced level, on this whatever 5th or 6th tutorial you're doing, I'm really trying to work like a real person, an engineer, and really try to deal with the kinds of complexities that you would really deal with if you were a real engineer. Right? So once again, the circle is right in the middle. So when I extrude that, I am going to want it to go symmetrically. So I'm going to go modify, press, pull. And here you might have trouble. The top circle is easy. The bottom circle is a little hard to select because sometimes it thinks you're trying to select the rib. So if you have that problem, just zoom in on something until it's really filling the screen, and then you should be able to select it. Another little pitfall I find sometimes people fall into. Okay. So now, like I said, I don't want this to go one way. That would make no sense at all. It would be this weird knob sticking out of one part of the rib. I want to go symmetrically. And my clients told me they want it to be a 6 millimeter knob. So since it's symmetrical, it's going 3 millimeters in each direction. Now, because that circle is embedded, here's another artificial intelligence thing. Because the circle's embedded in the rib, it thinks I want to cut, because often you do. And actually, eventually I will. But this time I want to make it a new body because I want to be able to work with this as a separate unit again. So we've talked about that before. You always have to make that choice. Do you want to join it to the thing you're making and make it permanently bonded so it's no longer an individual object, or do you want it to keep its individuality? We want this to keep its individuality because we need to repeat it multiple times. Okay, so change to new body, click OK. It's going to take a second on mine, so it's probably going to take yours quite some time to figure that out. Don't think you did something wrong. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to pattern this so that we get 5 of these going down the side of the rib, and that's where this really cool, powerful tool called Pattern on Path comes in. So choose Pattern on Path. Now yours, I've done, mine is stuck on bodies because that's the last thing I did when I did this before on last spring. So yours is probably on faces. I'm not really sure why it defaults to faces because all that would do is repeat the circle or the hollow cylinder or the surface of something. I want to repeat the entire knob, so I need to tell it it's guessed wrong. I want bodies. Sometimes I wish it wouldn't guess and just let me decide. But I guess, when you're an engineer and you're working, these kinds of things will speed up your work if it gets right enough times, as opposed to stop you and make you have to think, which is what it's doing here. So I want to make sure it's telling me I'm selecting a body, and then I'm going to select the knob. And then I want to select a path. So the path here is this middle line, and sometimes I get a warning here and it doesn't seem to have an effect. So if you do, don't worry about it. So I want it to run the repetition pattern down this line. And you'll notice if you start pulling this out, it will create 3 of them and move them around. But our client wants 5. And then we don't want it, the identical, I'm not even sure what that does because I never use it. I'm not sure why that's the default. Because path direction is what I want. I want it to follow the path and stick to the path. So I'm not really sure why you would use identical. I could Google that sometime and figure it out. And I've got 5 of them. And then my client has told me that they want the first one to be 48 millimeters from the last one. So they want the extent. They haven't given me spacing like we had in the Lego. They've given me the extent. They want the whole thing to be 48 millimeters from start to finish. Those are always your 2 choices. How far apart do you want them? Or, which I could have said 9.6, I guess. Or how far do you want the whole thing to go? And it just depends what you've been told. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. And now I've got my little knobby things. Now the problem here is that I created my circular pattern here in the timeline. And I mistakenly, on purpose, created my knobby things further on in the timeline. I could have inserted that step before the circular pattern, which I'll show you how to do in a minute, but I didn't know how to do that yet, let's pretend, and I made a mistake. And I can't push these around. So what I'm going to have to do in this case is either redo this pattern on path back here, or just get rid of the circular pattern and redo it. And I think the easiest thing here, and again, I'm making a mistake on purpose because you're going to make a lot of mistakes and I want to show you how to deal with them. I'm going to right click on the circular pattern and just delete it and just do it after that I've made all the little knobs. Okay. So now that I've made all the little knobs, I'm going to say create pattern, circular pattern. And here it's for some reason it's jumped. Oh no, it's right. I want it to be choosing bodies. So if it hasn't done that, please make sure it's doing that. And then I'm selecting objects. So here I've got a lot of objects to select. I've got the rib and I've got each of these little knobs because they're all individual units because I made the knob a new body because it had to be. And that's just the way it is. So I got 6 of them. And I want to now choose my axis. Okay. And then I want to tell it that I don't want 3, which it's always obsessed with. I want 5 and click OK. And now I've got my 5th prototype finished. I show it to my client and they say, you know, that's nice, but actually I would really like these to be notches instead of knobs, which does get me to show you how to insert a step in your timeline. So far, all we've done is gone back in the timeline and edited a step and then jump forward. You can also add a step in the timeline in between, and that's what this nifty little gray bar is about. If you pull this, you can pull this to wherever you want to work and insert a new step, not just edit an old step, but insert a new step. So I want to insert a step between where I made the knobs and where I made the circular pattern, so I don't have to redo the circular pattern yet again. And this will let me show you a really cool tool called Combine. So now I'm going to insert the Combine step, which is under Modify, Combine. Now this you use for a variety of different things. Sometimes you'll use it just to join things that were separate bodies just for convenience. So they're all one unit and you can work with them as a unit because you know that you want them to be stuck together. But you can also use this to actually cut notches into things like we're about to. And this uses the same vocabulary that a machine shop mechanic would use, which is you're going to choose the target body, which is what you want to cut into, which is the rib. And then you can choose the tool bodies, which are what you're going to connect to the target body, or in this case, what you're going to cut into the target body. So there's only one target. You can't choose more than one target body. So for once, it automatically jumps to the next step. And so we are going to choose all the little knobs and it will let us choose as many things as we want to be tools to cut into it, because that's what those little chisels and stuff that a machine shop worker uses are called. They're called tools. A drill is a tool. So we're going to turn these into little drills, basically, by selecting them as our tools. And we could ask them to join, which would just make it one unit. But in this case, it has guessed right. We do want it to cut, and we're going to click OK. And now the gray bar doesn't move, like it doesn't jump forward. It thinks I might still want to be adding new steps. So the next thing I want to do is take the gray bar and push it forward into the present time and reapply the circular pattern. And now I'm finally finished with my 6th prototype, except I want to turn off the sketch because now it's annoying. And I want to change the display to shaded so I can really see this in all its beauty. And I could certainly apply an appearance now, but I think I've done enough. So I'm just going to go ahead and save this and turn it in and say, Mr. Oken, I just conquered an incredibly complicated design through 6 prototypes using all kinds of different tools. I am awesome.